Welcome to FuzzFeed206, everyone. This is VesperBat on a solo broadcast. Actually, apologies for the slight delay in the feed. Just returned home from an active scene in unincorporated King County. So the subject of that scene was an officer-involved shooting. So I'm going to take an opportunity during this stream to kind of discuss what it is that we do when these types of events happen. And I know we've covered it in the past. I know this is something that we've talked about at length during an incident back in April, but it certainly is something that bears repeating. So, I mean, here are the details. We got a call just after 2 o'clock this afternoon that one of our detectives, Seattle Police detective, who was working closely with two Department of Corrections, Washington State Department of Corrections officers, was attempting to serve a high-risk felony no bail warrant. What that basically means is the person is dangerous, and it's something that needed to be approached with great care and caution. No bail means that they don't get to bail out once they get to jail. Once they're booked, that's where they stay until decided by a judge, by the courts. And of course, felony is the most serious type of offense as compared to misdemeanor. So we have one SPD detective, two DOC officers. They're out near Renton, which is a city. It's a suburb of Seattle. And they are looking for this person, this man, 37-year-old man. I should also say that the three people, the three law enforcement personnel who were looking for this individual were also members of a task force, the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms Department, task force for, I believe it's Puget Sound Violent Crimes Task Force, I think is close. However, it was not a task force operation. It was one of those instances where they were task force members, which basically means they are veteran law enforcement personnel. And while they ordinarily serve on this task force, this was not a federal warrant, nor was it a task force investigation or operation. So all three personnel went out to a place near Renton, and it was a home there, and they believed that this specific person might be there. And so upon approach, they did notice this man outside, and this man fired at the officers. This man fired at the two DOC officers and the Seattle Police detective. One DOC officer and our SPD detective returned fire and wounded the suspect, wounded the man. I can tell you that the man was transported to Harborview Medical Center. And Harborview Medical Center is actually the region's premier trauma center. So anyone who is seriously hurt in a motor vehicle collision, in an industrial accident, any serious injuries, anything that could be life-threatening is typically going to be dealt with at Harborview Medical Center. I mean, they are absolutely amazing there. The doctors and nurses are top tier. So the suspect, the 37-year-old man, was transported to Harborview. He underwent surgery, and there he is, currently recovering. So, of course, my role as a public information officer is to go to the scene and get information and get ready to distribute that information to news media who are on scene, and also to the our greater audience who we reach on our social channels. And of course, this is one of those social channels. So this is just resharing information that is hot off the press, so to speak. So when I was there, I saw our crime scene investigators, or CSI, as they are more commonly referred. I also had a chance to see our Force Investigation Team, or FIT, that's what we call them, Force Investigations Detectives, and SPD Homicide. Our homicide detectives were there as well. Also, representatives from the Office of Professional Accountability. And this type of a response is completely normal for an officer-involved shooting. And so the breakdown of responsibilities is that you have the Force Investigations detectives taking the lead on the force used by the officers. And in this case, it's the SPD detective and the DOC officer. And you might ask, well, why is the SPD doing an investigation out near Renton, not even in Renton, but in unincorporated King County, that involves another state agency? Well, the fact of the matter is, we did have a detective involved. And, while it was not specifically an SPD case, or at least not that I'm aware of, we've got the personnel, the expertise, the resources to move this forward. And as an organization that is, nearing completion of a federal consent decree, I think there's a certain amount of, investment in new protocols, new policies, new procedures, and a great deal of pride for all of the people who, contributed to, crafting those policies and designing those procedures so that the investigation that we do is certainly a model for other agencies to follow. So that is why the Seattle Police Department is the lead on this particular investigation, and why, our personnel traveled outside the city for it. So we've got the Force Investigation Team handling the component of the investigation that deals with the force used by the officers, the deadly force, although it resulted in an injury. Anytime you use your handgun, it's considered a deadly force encounter. We have SPD homicide detectives who are investigating the actions of the 37-year-old man, investigating the suspect because this suspect did fire a handgun at police. That is its own separate crime. And that investigation moves forward along a parallel track to the Force Investigation Team investigation. So you've got homicide investigating the suspect, and you've got FIT detectives investigating the deadly force used by police. The crime scene investigators, or CSI detectives, they're there to support both investigations. They're going to go out, they're going to take photos, they're going to look for any and all forensic evidence that might be on scene. however small, however minute, and they're going to collect it. And all of this will lead towards police reaching, to the best of our human ability, some sort of measure of truth. Now, because this was a joint warrant service, and it was not with our uniformed patrol personnel, the vehicle that we used, I do not believe was equipped with dash cam. But that said, anyone who's been watching this stream knows that the Seattle Police Department works very diligently to release any kind of video footage during critical incidents. And an officer-involved shooting is exactly that. So if there is any surveillance footage from that neighborhood where the incident took place, we will certainly discover it. And after conferring with detectives, we will work to release it. And our track record is typically 24 to 48 hours, so we're very quick. And so that is a conversation that I had just in the past 2 hours with the commanders on scene. So, next steps. I just posted on the SPD blotter a blog post kind of detailing what I just said. And it's truly a matter that's in the hands of detectives, both homicide and FIT. These things are not quick. The investigations are actually very slow, deliberate, and methodical. And the detectives will take whatever time they need to ensure that every person who is present is interviewed, any witnesses, any evidence that's been collected is examined and reviewed, and certainly in regards to the actions of the suspect, that case will be worked up for a consideration of criminal charges for shooting at police. So I think that is a pretty fair synopsis of the evening's event. 2 separate investigations, both being conducted by the Seattle Police Department, 1 homicide, 1 forced investigations. Of course, OPA was present. And it's important to add that these types of things, they're very preliminary. It just happened. And it's one of those things where I'm headed out to a scene and I actually don't have any information other than a critical incident occurred. And then from a public information standpoint, you really have to go straight to the source. You talk to the people who are on scene. You talk to the people who are in a position to know. We don't speculate. We don't guess. We try to be as quick as possible, but we do not want to sacrifice accuracy for speed. It's not something that we believe serves any purpose for anyone, quite truthfully. So talk to the folks on scene, talk to the incident commander in this particular case, talk to the acting assistant chief of criminal investigations, talked to the head of force investigations, and talked to the head of our gang unit. And, not that this was gang related, but the SPD detective does report to him in a capacity separate from the actual task force. And just made sure that we had a clear picture. And of course, as soon as I had that information, made sure that the media partners who were patiently waiting on scene could get that. I think we actually got it to them in time for their 5 o'clock newscast. I think a couple of the stations carried it live. And from there, we try to get it written up for a blog post. And of course, it's one thing to do a preliminary media briefing. The blog post takes a little bit longer. We want to make sure the commanders have a chance to weigh in and provide feedback and input. So the blog post we were able to get up here just at about 7:30. And so blog post is up, shared it on our SPD social channels, and there's the information. Now the information will change if the investigation determines that new information sheds a different light on the incident. Or if, of course, video surveillance becomes available. I think that's actually something that's pretty critical. And if that video surveillance does become available, we will be certain to publish it, just like we have in previous instances. So that's kind of where we're at. And actually, CPD-80 was going to join me on this post, but CPD-80 worked very hard to get that blog post in the works and was not able to get home in time to join the stream. So I do see there's at least one viewer is just going through our officer-involved shooting protocols. We had an officer-involved shooting today in a area just outside of Seattle, but it did involve one of our employees, and I was just outlining how all of that works. And of course, Twitch is a social channel that we currently use, and the information that gets shared on the SPD blotter, the information that gets shared through traditional media is certainly good enough to be shared on this stream. And that's kind of where it is. So with that topic being concluded, I wanted to mention that today was a CSTAT day. That's where we look at all of our crime data. And one of the subjects that came up last week was gun violence in Seattle. And having had a chance to talk to Lieutenant Mark Garth Green, who is our gang unit commander, we have been able to make some progress since this past week, where we actually arrested several people for gun violence in Seattle and beyond. And so those people are in King County Jail as we speak. We have recovered some guns. And in fact, we're going to have some gun pictures ready tomorrow being Thursday, for publication in regards to one of the arrests that we made just late last week. So you make an arrest on a person, either on probable cause or on charges, and if they're in a car, you seize the car, you impound the car with cause, of course. You don't just get to search it. We'll get a search warrant. Getting a search warrant, it takes time. It's not something that you just type in a code and a computer spits one out. It actually requires an affidavit of probable cause, and it has to be articulated in a way that the King County Prosecutor's Office and a judge will agree that we get to search someone's belongings, whether it's a storage locker, a car, a house, that sort of thing. And yeah, not a blank check. It's something that we all take very seriously. It's something that would overrule everyone's basic Fourth Amendment rights. But in the case of criminal investigations, we feel important that we actually do a very thorough, complete, exhaustive investigation. Assistant Chief Robert Murr calls it the relentless pursuit of information. And yeah, of course, it's something we're going to do. And in this case, we did. And lo and behold, the car that we impounded had a couple of guns in it. I think with high-capacity magazines, too. So we'll have those pictures available publicly tomorrow. So that's kind of the gun violence recap for this week. Anyone who watches the stream who is near Seattle would be familiar with the Alki neighborhood. And we had a homicide in Alki last week. Alki is in West Seattle. It's right on the water. It's absolutely stunning. Beautiful view of Elliott Bay and downtown Seattle and the Olympic Mountains. Of course, it was amazing weather. For May, that's pretty uncommon here in Seattle, but we'll take it. And so we had Alki absolutely saturated with police. And our mobile precinct was there, bike officers were there, all that. And so this is, of course, one of those examples that speaks to that very visible police response to violent crime that occurred in our city. So naturally, we're going to continue doing that. We're going to ensure that we make people feel comfortable in those areas that they like to go. And Seattle, as far as big cities goes, is one of the safest, absolutely one of the safest. We've got a very low homicide rate. That said, gun violence is something that we track relentlessly. We take it incredibly seriously. And, it's one of those things where we just don't call it in. We go to every incident, we collect evidence, and we map it. We look at times of day, days of week, locations, and it's broken into two categories: shots fired and shootings. Shots fired incidents where someone fired a gun, and we know they fired a gun because there were bullet holes, and there is evidence like shell casings, eyewitnesses, that sort of thing. A shooting is where someone was shot and injured. So it's stuff that we track. It's stuff that we take very seriously. And that was also one of those things that we talked about at CSTAT. So getting the gun violence situation to a point where we are seeing a downward trend instead of a plateau or upward trend is that's our goal. So not saying that the individual that we had the encounter with today was involved in any of the gun violence that we're currently investigating, because I honestly don't know. What I do know is that he had a felony warrant, and it was a high-risk, no-bail felony warrant that he was being pursued for. So that's kind of what I have. Officer-involved shooting, kind of the protocols for response, how those things go, the separation between the investigations on two parallel tracks, because they're both incredibly important to our personnel. Knowing that someone is going to pull a gun on police and shoot. I mean, if you're going to do that to police, you are likely to do that to anyone. So ensuring that we've got a solid case on him, but also making sure that we do an exhaustive review of the force that we use to make sure that we're abiding by our own policies, procedures, etc., training. And that component is certainly vital to the public trust. And we wanted to make sure that we talked about that part as well. So that's the officer-involved shooting. And again, just me because colleagues worked late too. Gun violence in review. Also, I would say shout out to our officers who have been working diligently on property crime in the North Precinct. Anyone who lives north of the Ship Canal in Seattle lives in the North Precinct, so 145th south to the Ship Canal. And as we've learned through our own data, that's been an area where property crime has been something that we've been working very hard to address, and property crime in the North Precinct is down this year. So with the warmer weather and the possibility of people breaking into cars, always a good idea to not leave anything without you. So I'm going to have a short feed tonight, largely because I've run out of information on the officer involved shooting. It's really what I wanted to talk about. Any questions? We're available on a number of different social channels. We're available on Twitter, mainly at Seattle PD. We're available here on Twitch, FuzzFeed206 specifically, Facebook, Reddit, Nextdoor. So any questions, just give us a holler. If there's anything that you want seen, covered on a future stream, do let us know. This is our podcast, and that's basically what this amounts to. This is an opportunity for us to dig into issues, dig into police stories at a deeper level, and doing so while playing Destiny. It just feels like a pretty safe space to have a conversation about, anything related to government services, public service, law enforcement, and even something as complex as an officer-involved shooting, which we had this afternoon. So we're happy to do it. It's a service that we're happy to provide. And again, if there's anything you ever want covered in a future stream, drop us a line here, or reach out to us on one of the aforementioned social channels. So on that happy note, last words for the day. Of course, last word, Kofife, just because. And with the upcoming June weather, which we are hopeful will be warm and delightful in Seattle, just want to remind everyone just to practice those basic safety tips. And until next time, eyes up, Guardians.